Hello, I'm Mary V. Today, let's go through a checklist of basic things that you need to do in order to play the violin and improve on the violin. So I was watching a lovely interview with Hilary Hahn, who was describing what she did to get comfortable on the violin. In college, she was cutting up sponges and trying dusters and all sorts of things because it's that important to get comfortable, because you don't want to start engaging this muscle and which hurts your arm and travels all the way down to your left hand and makes it very, very painful to play, and you start losing flexibility, all kinds of problems. You do not want to hold the violin like that. So if you have a long neck, which many women do and many people do, you need something. If you don't want to use a shoulder rest, here's mine. You can see that I use my shoulder rest at a particular angle, and I've bent it into shape for my shoulder. And I would recommend never use a shoulder rest that goes around the shoulder like that. I think that immobilizes and starts engaging the big muscle at the back of the neck. Leave that one alone and have your shoulder rest starting from the top of the shoulder down, if you can, like this. Right? And keep the shoulder rest away from the part of the shoulder that moves and try and put it in the hollow there. But back to pads, there's so many things you can use. Sponges. I found this sisal mat, which is very nice for the bath. It's actually incredibly soft. And rather than have a white one, I would kind of sew something to cover it to make it less noticeable. Just with running stitch like that or whatever, if you can't sew. Then you've got other types of cloths that have got little sponges in them. They're thicker, microfiber. They're great because they're non-slip. There's a big microfiber duster here. So I would recommend doing everything you can to do what Hilary Hahn does. She puts her violin down, she turns her head, and by the weight of her head she holds the violin. That is the ideal. I like to tilt my violin up quite a bit, which is what this height at the back is for. It's so that the violin isn't flat, but it's turned around. It's just easier for many people to play like that, nice and angled. So I would recommend think about just using the weight of the head to hold the violin and see if you can free your shoulder. And if you do make a pad, try not to make an enormous one that covers the moving part of the shoulder, the round part of the shoulder here, because you'll end up immobilizing it. So try and make the pad the size where it will fit in here, where it doesn't really move so much, at least the crucial part doesn't move so much. In here where the hollow is, and down to here. So a rectangle is really the best. You can see that this pad, if it was placed here and you put an elastic band, it's really not a good place, but if you can sort of cut it and make it further in towards the neck, that you can see that frees that part of the shoulder. The next fundamental thing is holding the bow and making sure that you've got a bow hold that gives you very flexible fingers so that you can cushion the bow hold as it goes, the bow stroke as it goes up and down. And the reason we do that is so that we're not rigid and we're not able to cushion the changes of bow. So the difference between doing that and cushioning it is so many people start by putting the weight of their hand at the back towards this part. You see a lot of people in films doing this. whereas the weight of the hand is actually forward. And that's the difference. If you put your hand on the bow and you just tilt it so that the inside of your first finger is touching the grip. There's the grip there. That's all you need to do. And the pinky goes on top. Another common thing is spreading the fingers out too much, right? Well, it really immobilizes the hand, and all you can really do is with exactly the same position. Now that's going to really make a difference when you get to more complicated bowings or playing off the string or anything. You can't really do it with a claw-like hand where nothing can move. So keep the fingers nice and natural, and keep the thumb bent. So when you do a down bow, go down, and when you do an up bow, go up. And practice that and really exaggerate it, because that's what you need to do with bowing. Look and see if you think it's straight, and then check in a mirror. And do nice long bows. So, and stop when you come to a certain point, right? Check in the mirror and see if that's straight. And if it's not, then you just need to keep checking in the mirror until you can do bows that look straight. And remember to stand at a right angle, because if on Zoom, if I'm not absolutely at a right angle, the bow always looks crooked. Whereas if I stand at a right angle, I know it's straight. The fourth finger is always the weakest, and it has to be accommodated first, no matter what size of hand you have. If you've got a large hand, a small hand, just make sure that when you put your fingers down, that your fourth finger is curved. Okay? Try and make it curved. Now you can see that my fourth finger, when it's curved, it actually faces in towards the third finger. So I lose a lot of distance if I keep it curved. So I have to sort of change the other fingers and move them around to make sure it's curved. Sometimes it's not curved. I've learned to play just with fourth finger pressure on it. But you can see how curved my fourth finger is back towards the third. So you've got to accommodate stuff like that. Now the thumb, where does the thumb go? If you've got a large hand, the thumb will be more or less opposite the first finger. And it'll just sit there, and it may be quite high up because you've got large fingers which are quite upright. And your pinky, your fourth finger, there's no problem. That's fine, that would all work, right? Now the difference is if you've got very small hands like me and a short fourth finger like me, you have to accommodate the fourth finger and set the other fingers back. I've done other videos about this, like that. Rather than working with a large hand, working up the way, people with small hands have to work down the way and set their hand like that, back, so that their fourth finger is really usable, okay? Now that means that the thumb changes position when you do this, when you set your hand back. It's like that. Do you see? It's set back rather than this, which creates a sort of tightness and a claw here. It creates a tightness there. So if you get your thumb further back, it's actually in line with your hand, which is further back. Okay? You see, when you set your fingers back, the thumb is in line with the hand. It isn't left like that. One of the major things is how you put your fingers down on the string, and a lot of people use far too much pressure. You don't need an incredible amount of pressure to press that little string onto the fingerboard. So if you can get the feel of it without the bow, without anything, and just feel it, how little pressure it actually takes. I would explore that all over the violin, even with the fourth finger, just to see how little pressure it actually takes. You don't have to do that every time you play. In fact, there's a feeling of flexibility. Now, starting to use the left hand, a lot of people, they may start to play like this. Okay, now their whole hand is actually in the wrong place. So rather than wiggle your fingers to try and get in tune, if you meant to go and you started, it's all too low, isn't it? So stop and move the whole hand into the right place. Now, the reason for doing this is because right from the very start, the best thing to do is to start sorting out your intonation, because it's one of the biggest issues on the violin. To get into the best habit, move your whole hand and set your hand and learn where your first note is, rather than trying to get your intonation right by doing this. Like that. Don't wiggle your fingers around. Get into the habit of finding out where your first note is. That's too low. Nearly there. So when you play the violin, one of the first things you need to do when you start getting all the other mechanics right is listen, stop, and adjust the right way. Don't wiggle around, but set the left hand in the correct place and spend time doing that. So listen, listen, listen. I think a lot of practice away from music is really good because it focuses the mind on noticing what's actually going on rather than always reading music. Because sometimes you need to have a relationship with the violin where you're actually genuinely looking to notice what is going on and stop and correct it. When you are always looking at music, you're in a sort of different process. You're processing reading the music. So that's a different thing. So I would recommend quite a bit of practice and make up your own exercises using G major, D major scales. Very easy. Okay, now I'm going to do something and see if you can spot it, okay? Okay, that was pretty easy to spot that my bow distribution wasn't good. I didn't leave myself an equal amount of time for the last notes of the four, did I? So I went... I just ran out of bow. So this is where the coordination between the left and the right comes. See if you can spot something else I'm going to do. Okay, I wasn't very good at that, but the left hand and the right hand weren't moving exactly together. And that's a very important thing. That's where scales really help you. to start coordinating with different shapes of bowing and different shapes of left hand, like. Now, supposing you're practicing one thing and another thing comes up, you start being aware of real pain here or somewhere in your thumb at the back of your hand here. You might start feeling a lot of tightness. Now, and you're practicing something else, you're listening to intonation or whatever. But the thing is that may be the time to have a notebook and note down some things that you want to concentrate on, because lots and lots of things turn up. Whatever, it just goes on and on and on and on. There are lots and lots of physical things that crop up. And you, by getting away from the music and making your own exercises, very simple exercises, it gives you a chance to notice what is cropping up all the time. There's always things that crop up. Could be intonation, it could be your fingers are rigid. It could be you're slapping your fingers down far too hard, or you're getting a very sore thumb and it's not moving. All these things have got answers to them, but only if you notice what's going on. So give yourself a chance to examine all the time, and that is the way for fast progress. It really is. Don't wait for someone else or your teacher to tell you. Try and notice things yourself. One skill that you need, above all, is to start listening to sound and intonation at the same time. Are you making a nice sound? And is it in tune? Are the two basic questions that you will take with you all the way through your violin career. And that's something that you do need to learn to do. And in no time, it becomes a habit, and you're able to isolate things so much better. So I hope your practice goes really well. And it's always good to remind yourself whether you've got the basics really right, and change things if you haven't. If anything is rigid, not working, holding you back, change it. Find out how to change it. Have a look at some of my other videos, and hopefully you'll find something that gives you a bit more detail about these things. So I'll leave it there. I'll say bye-bye.